Thanks for tuning in to today's live stream. A little bit of an interesting one. Today we're going to be talking about belly fat. And why is that? If you're worried about belly fat, most people just assume it's cosmetic. But medically, it's not. The most dangerous fat you have, you can't actually surgically remove it. Or what we say in the clinic is the most dangerous belly fat is the fat you can't grab. So what is belly fat when we talk about belly fat in the weight loss world? There's two types of fat. There's subcutaneous fat, which means under the skin. So that's sort of what everybody thinks about when they think belly fat, big hanging belly, liposuction. Again, you can get large amounts of subcutaneous belly fat. And that's what liposuction does remove. But then there's also visceral fat, which is inside the abdomen and sits around your organs, your liver, your pancreas, your intestines. Okay. And why is this distinction important? Well, subcutaneous fat kind of is cosmetic. It just sits there and doesn't do as much except for store energy. Where visceral fat has a few more functions besides storing energy that can be accessed sort of more quickly than subcutaneous fat. Visceral fat does have some more hormonal influence that drives insulin resistance, increases cardiovascular risk, and again messes with our hormones. So people who have belly fat, I'm not talking extreme belly fat, people with that little pooch, that dad bod, that whatever it is they're dealing with, they don't have belly fat. I mean, they have belly fat, but it's not a cosmetic problem. It's a metabolic one. So this is going to come as a surprise, is liposuction, getting fat taken off the outside, doesn't actually increase your diabetes risk, your cholesterol, or your blood pressure. You'd think, oh man, if I lost 10 kilos, 20 kilos of liposuction, surely I would see some medical benefit from that. I mean, apart from carrying, 10, 20 kilos less, you really don't. And part of that's because it's the visceral fat that's handling most of that. Again, the liposuction doesn't remove insulin signaling fat. It doesn't remove the visceral fat. Liposuction does make you cosmetically look better. It shapes things here and there and around. But this is sort of like repairing a car with a faulty engine. Might look pretty on the outside, but it's not going to go anywhere. So again, we're not removing the insulin resistance with that subcutaneous fat removal or surgery. Okay, we're not removing insulin resistance with surgery. What you may notice when you first start working out or you start to get consistent is that your belly actually shrinks a little bit faster than the rest of your body. Your pants are a little bit slimmer. And why is that? You go, well, visceral fat is actually easier for the body to lose once your metabolism starts to kick in with extra activity and proper diet. It's partly the way that the fat's designed. It's an easy way for the body to sort of shift to get energy for organs, for that, storage to fight predators or run from predators when we need energy. So we can lose fat early on, and that's going to be our visceral fat. So we may see it, but when we get on the scale, however, we might not notice the number reduce. And part of that's going to be when you lose fat also has a lot of water, so your body will shift that water weight around. So you might still be holding on to not a lot of water, but a lot of water. Also, when you lose visceral fat, you keep your muscles. So your muscles weigh more than the fat, and you're holding on to those. So again, you're not going to see a decrease in your weight from the muscles or anything like that. And also, partly as well, our body does want to hold on to energy. So when we do break down visceral fat, it is going to take some of that ultimate energy and store it as something called glycogen, which we store in the liver and elsewhere, but we can use for, again, energy when we need it. A little bit harder pathway or easier pathway, depending, but that's where it all goes. So what's the takeaway from this? Well, if your waist is shrinking before your weight drops, take the win, take the W. You're going to look good. It's a kind of a good motivator to keep you going because you're losing weight, or losing fat, I should say. Sorry. And again, don't get discouraged if your belt's looser, but the weight hasn't dropped. That's physiology. That's not failure. Your body's just shifting things around until we get where we want. Visceral fat, again, we sort of alluded to it yesterday, is really sensitive to stress hormones, right? It's really sensitive to stress hormones like belly fat. Sorry, we had a question over there. What was that? Lost it. There we go. It's fine. I'll have to pull it up a little bit later. So we talked about our stress hormones and how those things affect the visceral fat. Same with our sleeping and how that affects our belly fat. So if we remember, we talk about cortisol, which is the body's stress hormone. And again, that stress hormone, cortisol, if it's chronically high, cortisol tells our body to store fat, particularly around the organs, because that's going to be the easiest way for it to grab that energy when it needs it. Again, think evolutionarily to run away from predators or to fight predators, or enemies. And we talked yesterday about poor sleep and how poor sleep, one, that new hormone leptin, but how sleep in general, it's going to raise, lack of sleep raises our hunger, lowers our fullness, and overall those hormones worsen our insulin resistance, which we talked about on Friday. And again, stress prefers that visceral fat because it's a faster shift of energy than subcutaneous fat. So you can't out-diet sleep deprivation, okay? If your sleep's broken, your fat loss will be too, because you can't fight the physiology. You can't fight the metabolic conditions. Now, a couple of streams and other things that you might have seen would be, oh, you've got belly fat, just go do 1,000 sit-ups, and, look at me, I'm super lean now. You can't really spot reduce fat loss or where the fat comes from, okay? Generally, fat's kind of distributed evenly. There are some medical conditions, but generally fat's distributed evenly amongst your whole body. However, visceral fat being lost early does mean that you do see actually the stomach belly fat, or the belly, shrink first. So that's a good thing. So when we start working out, visceral fat is metabolically responsive. It responds to these energy needs, the working out. So you do lose fat there. So you can kind of target belly fat, but you can't target sort of subcutaneous belly fat. So a little quick loss for you, or a quick win, quick fat loss for you. So just keep in mind that belly fat and the visceral fat, it's not permanent, or not as hard to remove as that subcutaneous. It's often the thing that reduces early, and it's the thing that will also respond to insulin improvement and respond and make your body respond better to your own insulin. So the takeaway is you can't target your fat loss, but you can target your metabolism by getting that visceral fat down, by starting your journey. I guess one of the questions that we always get is, what's, especially in the GP land and in doctor world, is why do medications work where my willpower has failed? And I think a lot of times, and we talk about this every time, is we're all motivated. We all have the willpower, and obesity is not a motivation issue. It's a signaling issue. It's the hormones signaling hunger, fullness, and sometimes that noise gets too hard to just block out. And that's where some of the medications like the GLP-1s work, because they act on centers in the brain to help stop the noise, to stop those signals, maybe even reverse those signals. They also help improve your insulin sensitivity. We talked about how how having high insulin and high glucose, just preferentially stores to fat. And if we kind of block those things, the first thing that's going to go is this visceral fat, and then the extra fat. So medications don't replace a good lifestyle. They make the lifestyle biologically achievable. It's up to you to create the discipline. The medications remove the biological resistance that we have inside us. I guess one of the things that we see a lot, or we use as a marker of health or weight, even with some of the medications to qualify, one of the markers that we use is BMI, body mass index. And it's a good generic marker. It's kind of like the same as calories in, calories out. Yes, but because what you see with BMI is you have people who can be thin, but metabolically just unhealthy. Or you see people who are heavier, but they're improving metabolically, and they get great results. So good results, or a good health marker, is going to be waist measurement, and then things that we test in the medical office. Your HbA1c, which is a marker of your blood sugars sort of over 3 months. So it's just a simple blood test. Same thing for your cholesterol and triglycerides. So what's your body doing with the extra fats and cholesterols that we're eating? And also we can look at your liver to see, are you storing a lot of fat in your liver, or is your body handling that appropriately? So don't get too locked up on weight. I mean, that's important. So, it's the easiest marker to stand on the scale. But health just isn't a number on a scale. It's what's happening inside you and your organs that's going to be the ultimate decider of what you're metabolically like, biologically like, health-wise. I guess the big question is always, hey, I've dieted, I've been perfect, I've lost all this weight, I was good, and now I've regained it back. Why is that? It's biology. So after weight loss, your body actually fights back. It goes, oh, I've been in this kind of bit of starvation or low level. I feel like I should be just a little bit heavier. I feel like I need these things. And it's your body just pushing back. And part of that goes to this thing called set point theory. And so it's partly genetic effects, partly, training your body. And it kind of has this sort of set weight that it goes, this is how I feel Gary is. Dr. B, you're going to be this much weight. And I'll give you a little bit of a buffer, but anything outside that, we're going to fight. And we know how hard the body fights metabolically and everything. Sweets are sweeter, everything just, it's more tempting. And part of the way that the body does fight back is it increases those hunger hormones. It goes, Gary, you're a bit low weight, eat something. It's telling me, just go. Also, those same things that we always talk about when the body's starving, and in this case, outside our set point, it goes, well, we don't have the energy to spare. Let's just slow down our metabolism. Let's make you act a little bit less. Let's hold on to as much as we can. So again, your body's fighting you. It's saying, this is where I want to be. And because of all this, your weight regain risk increases. So what do you do about it? It's no different than managing blood pressure or asthma. You got to fight the fight, and it's a long game. So long-term weight management, no different than managing blood pressure or asthma. You just got to keep at it. It's not fun, but at least once you get to a point where you're at the weight you want or at your target, it's a lot easier to maintain. It's not easy, it's just easier to maintain. So just think, weight regain is biology. It's not a weakness in you. It's your body fighting, and you know what? You're stronger for fighting it back. So what are we going to take away from this? If you're carrying belly fat, the goal isn't to cut it out. It's to change your biology that actually puts it there. Okay? That's diet, exercise those things, and you'll see those results first, maybe even feel them in your tightness of your pants, but that's your goal. And it doesn't mean you're broken, just your metabolism is defending itself when you get to that point. So keep up the fight. Treat it with science, I guess a couple of questions for you is, have you noticed that your waist, have you noticed that your waist has changed before you really had a weight drop? I'd like to think that I have. I was kind of attributed that originally to, well, I'm just putting on the muscle, so it's balancing out. But, that's where it's coming from. All right, let's grab a couple of the questions that were up there. Here we go. How do I know if my belly fat is visceral or just a normal fat? So how do I know if my belly fat is visceral fat or just belly fat? Look, you can't really tell by appearance alone. If you have a grossly obese, really big belly, you could probably go, a lot of that's going to be subcutaneous. But in general, you can't really tell by appearance alone. That's where things like those blood tests we talked about, the HbA1c, and those kind of blood tests are things that are going to tell us what's happening metabolically inside. Also, if you have kind of a big belly and really skinny arms and legs, or like a potato with toothpicks, as you often hear things described, that can be a sign of a lot of visceral fat as well, because you'd think that things should pretty much distribute evenly on the outside. Again, there are some medical conditions but for the most part, that's probably an easy indicator. I'm not that overweight. Should I still be worried? Yeah, again, sort of we talked about, some people have normal weight but high visceral fat. And so that's where things like, I look thin, but my waist size is a little bit up. And that's where we really need to look at your metabolic health as a better idea for, am I healthy? And again, these generally are, simple blood tests. You don't do them every week, every whatever, once, twice a year along your journey. Or if you're concerned, you start somewhere, get a marker of where I'm at, and then we start our journey, our weight loss, fat loss journey, and test in, say, 6 months. And we can see how far we've really come metabolically, biologically, and hopefully looks-wise. So again, follow up with your medical professional to get that. What else we got? We've had that one. Does this mean dieting is pointless? No. Sorry. Diet still matters. No. So diet still matters. Part of the thing is, without addressing your hormones and metabolism, you're going to set yourself up for failure, because you're going to hit roadblocks that you just weren't prepared for or don't know how to handle. And so you're just going to spin your wheels and lose motivation and sort of fall off. And so again, I think that's where it's good to follow up with your medical professional, and be aware of all the things that we can't see, or we can see but we can't see on the inside, especially for the long term. What should I focus on instead of the scale? The common stuff. Instead of the scale, you could always look at measurements. So waist size is the really good one, because then your visceral fat's coming down, and then it's a pretty good marker for general, overall sort of health. Again, look at your metabolic markers. That would be the doctor. Your energy levels. You'll be surprised when you find out that, when I started my journey, I couldn't walk up the hill without stopping 1-2 times or being a little bit short of breath. Now, X months later, I walk up to the top of the hill, didn't have to stop. Or now I don't even stop at the top of the hill. I'm up and over and down and into the next part of my journey, part of my walk. So I think that's a good way. Also, the sustainability of your weight loss, fat loss journey is going to be another telltale sign for things that you can focus on. Sorry about that, everyone. Sorry about that. Let me just mute that. Okay. There we go. Sorry about that. Sorry. So what should I focus on inside of the scale? Again, waist size, metabolic markers, energy levels, and how sustainable your diet and exercise and your journey is. And that's probably going to be a bit better than weight alone. Okay. What's the first step if I think visceral fat is my issue? Start with an assessment. Get your weights measures, get your bloods taken with your medical professional. And again, that gives you a starting point, a starting reference to see where to go after that. All right, I'm going to end here, and hopefully we'll see you guys tomorrow, later this week for our talk on metabolic syndrome. Thanks, guys.